Thanks for joining us today. We're going to let people file in here, give it a couple of minutes. Jason, one of the founders of Nectar, co-CEO, Youval, our Chief Strategy Officer and founder of iDerive with me. Excited for this combo today. It's a little unique. A lot of chatter about how to use AI. I think there's a lot more chatter than people actually using it when it comes to running retail businesses or e-commerce businesses, sorry. But we're gonna, I think, have a thoughtful combo. Hope that's not presumptuous to say about how you can really start to be more efficient with analyzing your data and turning that into actionable insights. So this will be a change of speed, but for from what we've presented over the past few webinars, but a good one. So we'll give it one more minute to allow more people to file in here, and then we'll get going. Make sure to post any questions that you have in the chat, and we can kind of go from there. But we'll get started in one more minute here. And today we'll be covering this presentation. We'll show you how show you an example of how we're using Claude to query data and translate that into actionable insights. So again, I'm Jason Landro, I'm one of the founders of Nectar. We're a digital marketing agency, and have Yuval with me today. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey everybody, I'm Youval, the Chief Strategy Officer here at Nectar. I've been leading the development for the last few years about the iDerive platform, which takes data from omnichannel dynamics, Amazon seller, vendor, Amazon Marketing Cloud, and builds our analytic models and visualizations that help us drive better outcomes. And with the enhancements in AI lately, it's really transformed what is possible. So I wanted to share some of those things today with you. I think it'll be really impactful in how you start to unlock opportunities for growth and insight for the business.
Awesome. Let's get into it.
All right, let's jump in. So, one of the ways that, and we'll focus on Amazon, but this is true for other marketplaces and environments as well. Amazon gives you a lot richer data, which makes it in a way more competitive. More data means more levers to activate. And that means that you're at a disadvantage if you're not leveraging them. So a lot of the data we're talking about are advertising, inventory, listing and operational, revenue and margin, and search behavior and market demand, right? And all these unified give you a really concise view of performance. If you're just looking at performance through the lens of revenue, you're missing the picture on what's happening in terms of listing or operational impacts. If you're not looking at search query performance data, you don't understand search behavior changes and your market share in relations to those search terms and how to improve the tactics and where do you have growth opportunities. So by combining all these together, you're able to get a very unique view of your business that drives growth. From there, that requires to build what I would describe as a workflow or framework to ingest all this data, convert it into insightful information, which then allows you at the third step to make decisions such as, am I overspending on products that are not profitable? Um, what are the reasons why my sales are dropping? Is it market based? Is it operational based? How do I quantify those things? Where do I have opportunity for scaling at an efficient pace? Do I have stock out risks where I should know about that I should take actions on? And all these elements, if you can identify these in close to real time, that impacts your dollars and profitability pretty instantly.
Yeah, and just a bit of framing here. Amazon makes this challenging because these data sources are largely coming from different places, right? You get your advertising out of data out of the advertising console or API. If you're on Vendor Central, there's different API, Seller Central, same thing. And even within that, there's different APIs for inventory and revenue, and all that data not only has to be extracted, it has to be cleaned and married up because the way that Amazon reports on advertising is not instantly harmonious with the way Amazon reports on revenue, or the way your company looks. Company A looks at their revenue might be based on shipped COGS, and company B might be looking at shipped revenue. So there's all these nuances to every single business and the way that Amazon operates, which are essentially large barriers to analyzing this data in the way that makes sense for optimizing your business. So that's really the challenge that every brand is presented with, an agency for that matter, is how do you bring it all together? How do you make sure it makes sense? And that's step one. And step two is then how do you start to action off that data in an efficient way? And then step three is the evolution of really getting ahead with the insights.
That's right. And we'll show you a tangible example of what that looks like when you bring it all together. So things we're gonna kind of cover that's gonna leave you a couple of questions. You're gonna realize kind of what's possible with this data. The challenge is 100 plus reports on the API, and how do you bring it together, get the right strategic insights. How do you get there? I will walk through exactly kind of how to build those elements, and then you can have a decision to make whether how much you want to build in-house, what do you want to, and how much do you want to partner with a partner that may have some solution. So let's cover what's possible today. The big transformation that happened, I would say, throughout 25, but really in Q1 2026, is that AI platforms like Claude really became much more effective at analytics, more robust, less hallucinations, um, more memory, more context window, and I'll explain a few of those things. And that's just enabled things that weren't possible last year. And it's moving very, very quickly. Everybody's at a different stage of discovery at this point because it is so nascent. Some of you maybe are just starting to dabble in AI. Some of you have been using Gemini and Claude in the web interface. Some have downloaded the desktop apps and started to build workflows, automations, what they call agents, and routines. And there's no right or wrong here. I think we're all going to learn it eventually, but we have different paces of how we get there. Um, and what's happened now, and what we're seeing and what we're doing is analytics that would take us weeks to do and now take literally minutes. And I'll show you a build of that exactly. And I actually did that for the webinar in a few minutes. I think something more important as well is, um, as I keep going, there are different areas of the business that you want to consider. And we talked a little bit about those, right? You want to optimize for revenue, and there are various elements that come into revenue that give you visibility of what's driving those. Margin is critical. So as you start to invest, you want to make sure that you're also still being profitable. You want to make sure that your advertising is optimized, you're having the right search strategy, and then your listings are healthy. And all of these elements impact revenue. They're all heavily, heavily interconnected. So I want to show you now a demo of what that looks like, and then I want to show it to you first because it'll be really exciting, and then we'll talk about how we built this so it's less boring from that standpoint. So let me just go into here. Here we go. So this was, and I'll walk through how this was built, but this is essentially an HTML dashboard that was built using Claude. It uses our data in iDerive that connects via API, and I'll show you that workflow after. So what I've done is built one of those views that has margin, a diagnosis, inventory tab, listing health, search query performance, incrementality. And on Strategy Radar here, we're able to understand how things are doing across those different aspects. So I understand my revenue for the last 90 days is up or down, but now I understand some of the areas that I have opportunities. And I can see the health of these across different areas here, right? So I can see how advertising 40% is efficient, 30% is okay, and then there's 25% of wasteful. So we can double click into the wasteful and see what those opportunities are. On the financial side, I can identify right away products that might be losing money, right? And now I have an opportunity to do something about it. So as I sift through some of these various aspects, I'm identifying opportunities where products are performing well or underexposed or underperforming, and managing by exception gets you a better outcome. And as I filter on this, I can see the different products here that are causing that and what the issues might be. So they may be a combination of things that are impacting a product, right? I maybe have stock, but advertising is not efficient, and I'm losing money here because I'm overspending as a result, right? And this is, I can understand the position of this product within my portfolio as well. or I could go and look at more financial components and what is going on with these products. So let's see, for example, operationally, which are the products that have operational issues. So a lot of it can be out of stock, low inventory, and listing dynamics that I'll show you. So
Yeah, and I
really,
want to just to reframe this a little bit, or to help frame this a little bit, you don't get this data today in one place, which is the great part. It's not even just getting the data. You don't, it's not connected. There's no analytics. And so by bridging the data together and then using AI to query it, you're able to get to these insights. So I think what AI has really unlocked, which we've all hit on quickly, is that there's a lot of data and it can be really cumbersome and time consuming to interpret all of that data. Um, and AI allows you to get to that faster. What we'll touch on a little bit later is part of it is part of the outputs are based on the inputs, which are your questions and how you're prompting it, as well as the quality of the data. Which is why, it's important to connect Claude or any AI tool to a underlying quality data source.
Mhm.
Obviously, we have one. We're not the only one provider that does that, but it is a really, really critical step because if you have the wrong data, it's going to be telling you the wrong insights about your business. And it may not be hallucinating, it just might be interpreting, uh, you know, giving you insights based on data that is incorrect, which is effectively the same thing. But um, yeah, so there's layers to this that are really important to getting to outputs like this. I think it's very obvious how outputs like this can be hugely impactful for improving your business performance.
Um, I'll walk you through a couple examples, and what's important to understand is this was built with a single prompt in Claude, right? And it's not the ideal output, but this was used to be an example, meant to be an example. Here's how this can be helpful. I'm on the margin tab. There's been a lot of cost pressures this year with tariffs, inflation, and so I'm able to toggle my COGS percentage change in relation to selling price, or I can even go here in this table and update my COGS per unit. And what this is showing me right now is what products are driving my revenue, but then which products are driving my profit. So my number of products is driving my number one profit, right? In terms of revenue. But if I increase my COGS and change the dynamic, that starts to change. And now my profit drivers sometimes can be those products that are actually not necessarily my top revenue drivers. So that's very helpful to understand because ultimately, as a business, yes, you're responsible for top line, but a business not profitable is not really an exciting endeavor. From a diagnosis standpoint, this is incredibly powerful. So one of the things I've always been challenged is typically this is what you see, right? Between January and February revenue, there's been a drop. And yes, we reduced our spend in advertising, but you kind of know there's other factors, right? Operational factors, seasonal factors, but what are those factors and how do you quantify them? So because we have all this data, right, and we're able to bring it all together, we're able to build a model very quickly that looks at how much did search volume and market demand change? How much did out of stock impact lost revenue? How much buy box operational issues did we run into? Oh, we've created some optimizations on our listings, which drove incremental revenue. And then we've had some small deltas in pricing. And so now I have a bridge between January and February that tells a very different story in terms of my performance. And it's not necessarily we pulled ad spend, which normally would be the narrative. Instead, we're seeing that the biggest contributors were seasonality, some operational elements combined, driving those outcomes. And we can quantify each of these, which is really, really neat. And then you've got this seasonality curve here to really speak to that dynamic. So again, single line prompt, inventory. So inventory planning is really important. Sometimes you want to change your lead times. Why? Maybe Prime Day is coming up and you've got longer lead times. So let's say that you want to increase it, and now you're seeing right away your ASINs that have a weeks of cover that's not matching what you're looking for, and then you're seeing which ASINs you're actually spending advertising dollars on, which are at great risk. So kind of overlaying where you're spending, what your inventory coverage is, really helpful, identifying exactly what you need to do. And then we can look at, is there inbound? Is this going to be resolved pretty quickly? Because we have all that data again. So very, very helpful. I want to show you a couple more things, listing health, how many listings do I have that I don't have a buy box, out of stock, minor dips, things like that, suspensions. We can have all that visibility as well, and then estimating the dollars lost from that. So it's really unlocking those type of analysis would take so long to do, were honestly impossible because of a lack of time. And now you can do that on the fly. What you need clarity on is what you're trying to achieve, and now it's achievable.
I would
Uh,
also say the other benefit is that you those analyses would require multiple people typically. So you would have your ads person talking to your salesperson, talking to your inventory person. That in and of itself takes a lot of time. So by having all this data together and queryable, you're able to eliminate that not only time spent, but uh, delay, I guess, in getting those insights. So there's an efficiency gain, both in terms of speed to insights
mhm.
and being able to act on it, as well as operationally from a cost perspective. And, this is where to kind of get a little philosophical here. There's a lot of chatter right now in general about, is AI going to replace humans, or is it going to make them more efficient? I think this is a great example of where it makes teams more efficient. Um, is it possible if your team is bloated that something like this could reduce headcount? Sure. But ideally, you want the person handling the reporting or managing the business to be able to figure out what's going on right away and delegate the work that needs to be done. And that you shouldn't be having meeting after meeting to figure out what is wrong and how to fix it. And so this is, I think, a good conceptualization of how your
Mhm.
team can leverage data AI to get ahead faster, instead of kind of working the quote unquote old way.
And what we're looking at right now, so we looked at margin, we looked at inventory listing dynamics. Now we have context on business health. Now we can go and optimize at a search term level. And what we're doing here is using search query performance data, training that over time. And what that's identifying is the products, first of all, what the market demand is on each of these terms, and what our impression share, conversion rate, and even purchase share looks like. And what that allows us to do is identify those products over time or search terms that should be funded more because they have scaling opportunity, which one we should be cutting because they're not performing or they're highly cannibalistic. Seeing a question here. Let me read this. Is the data already available in our iDerive platform? Some of this data is available in the iDerive platform. What we're working on right now is building these workflow to be a lot more dynamic. If you think about the iDerive platform, it's a visualization of dashboards, and dashboards are inherently less flexible. What we're able to do now is build more custom analytics for each business with a lot more context into it and build in recommendations. Some of these things are being deployed in the iDerive platform today. What you're looking at here is more of the Claude integration, which is also being rolled out this week.
And to
Uh,
be clear, so for our brand partners who are on this webinar and might see this in the future, to be able to connect your own Claude account or create a Claude account that is your own, that you'll be able to connect your iDerive instance, where you'll be able to query all of the data and do what Yuval is essentially showing you right now and more. So that is rolling out, this month, and there's no extra cost for anyone who's already working with us.
Okay. So now that we've covered, kind of give you a sense of what's possible, get some excitement going, we'll talk about kind of how this works and give you kind of background on what does it take. So at the highest level, you need obviously to connect to data. You could load reports, but that doesn't work very well, right? The reports are generic, you're missing context, and then it's very manual. So you need somehow an API connection to bring these reports in. The problem with Amazon APIs, they're really finicky and you need a layer to house them, transform them, transition them. So um, the next piece is kind of a repeatable workflow. It's a data transformation component so that it's ready from an analytical standpoint. And the last piece, which you didn't necessarily see today, which is applying expert framework. Expert framework is bringing your subject matter expertise of how I should be looking at this data. It's almost teaching Claude and telling Claude how you want it to do the work. Claude is like a very smart intern from a prestigious university, but it doesn't have a lot of experience in your industry, your category, your business. And so the intern is going to make really smart presentations it may have some gaps and lead you the wrong way. So that's something that needs to be harnessed. So what can Claude do today really well, or ChatGPT or AI? All these things it does very well. Reconcile data, work in large volumes, apply analytical framework end to end that you're providing it. It can now run on a schedule, so you can have routines every morning, do this analysis, every morning tell me which listings are suspended. So that creates a huge operational efficiency on businesses. Um, what it can do and what you don't want to be doing is outsourcing strategic judgment. And there's a very good reason for that. We'll go more in details, but Claude doesn't have good context. You have to give it that context, and that's an entire exercise in of its own. That is building a memory. And what makes humans very special is our ability to weave interconnections with memories, things that we've learned 2 years ago, 3 years ago, things that have happened last month and last week, and we connect all these things together to lend us to the right conclusion. AI doesn't do that very well at all, and that's what makes it very, very dangerous. But there are ways to help it build the right context. And that's what we're doing here at Nectar to make this even more powerful and efficient, but always be on point. Um, so it sounds very easy. Here's the challenge. And what I showed you, I would describe as generic AI. I did not give it much context. All I gave it data. It looks impressive. I wouldn't trust it fully, right? And that was the point of the example is you see very precise numbers does not make them accurate. They're very precise figures with two decimal points. It's not very accurate from a strategic standpoint. So how do you become an expert AI, which follows validated frameworks and gives you a validated and properly sourced reasoning? That's what we're after. So there's a couple of ways to do that. One of them is you starts with obviously clean, unified, stable data models, right? So that the data doesn't change time and over time, and it's beginning to learn from that data. You're giving it very specific frameworks on how to work with that data. What is ROAS? How do you calculate it? What are metrics that are helpful? How do you evaluate and treat incrementality, right? If it changes its evaluation of incrementality every time you prompt it because it's an LLM, you're going to be getting different models every time and different recommendations every time, which is very dangerous. And the last piece that we talked about, the better the context and the memory that it's leveraging, the better it can evolve and make the right recommendation. It'll remember last week you had an operational issue, and therefore I shouldn't recommend spending more on this product, right? How do you build the right memory, context, and layer after layer, brick by brick, so that you get to better outcomes? That's how you get to really effective outcome. So let me show you what that looks like visually, and I think that's really going to be helpful to frame it all. This is Amazon's data ecosystem here on the top left. You've got Amazon Ads, Amazon Marketing Cloud, DSP, the ASP API for Seller Central and Vendor Central. You've got brand analytics, search group, a lot of different elements, and the catalog listings API. Each of these has dozens, if not hundreds of reports. But of course, your business doesn't work in a silo. You've got other marketplaces, Walmart, Shopify, Target, Instacart, TikTok. You're advertising on Meta, Google, right, and other DSPs. And all these are inter-influencing things, right? So that's your data ecosystem where you can generate reports from. And we bring all this via API into the iDerive platform. The iDerive platform is a ingestion mechanism, a data transformation mechanism to clean this up. We augment it so that you're able to look at your catalog strategically based on color, sizes, your brands, your subcategories, your materials, your price dynamics in a way that's strategic for you to look at your business because it's only as meaningful as how you strategically look at your portfolio. And then we make analytical calculations. So that gets you to a point where you get to an analytical model that's ready for Claude to work. The problem exists that if Claude connects directly to a raw report, you're asking it to do a lot of work, a lot of calculations. And what will happen there is more hallucinations, more miscalculations. And Claude will speak, and I say Claude, it's ChatGPT, Gemini, very similar, right? They're all LLMs. They speak with a lot of confidence. They're not necessarily accurate or correct, but they use so many words and very precise words that you tend to want to go with it, right? Path of least
Yeah,
resistance.
I also want to add a couple things here. So obviously we're using iDrive as a second layer. There are other software providers in full transparency. And then really, if you're thinking about do I outsource just the data analytics and reporting and then want to connect to it versus in-house, the big thing that I talked about earlier is it's not just pulling out the data and putting it all together. It also has to be married up in a way that makes sense. So an example would be Vendor Central. There's a delay in sales reporting. Uh, and but the ads reporting is real time. So how does that get harmonized? Is Claude going to tell you if you don't do that the right way? Claude could tell you of a drop in revenue because it's only seeing ads revenue in the past 24 hours based on the reporting, right? It doesn't have the right context essentially. I mean, that's one micro example. But there's also different windows for reporting sales and advertising versus uh, Vendor Central or Seller Central. There's different types of revenue that can be reported. So if that's not all organized the right way, then you're going to get these. They may not even necessarily be hallucinations. It might actually, the Claude might be calculating the data correctly or performing the calculations properly, but the underlying data is wrong or mismatched, so to speak, which would lead to improper output. So having this intermediate layer right here is uh, I can't emphasize how important it is. It won't work without it. And then with respect to building in-house, I would say if you're trying to do this one specific thing, it is for a one small piece, it's much more manageable. So, right, if you're just trying to build a
Mhm.
workflow around inventory reporting, you don't want to bring in the ads data or different data from different APIs, much more manageable. Uh, just being realistic. When you start to stitch together all these different APIs, and all these different data sources, different time frames and reporting windows, that's when the cost starts to compound exponentially. And Amazon historically does a terrible job of publishing updates about changes to the API. Sometimes you just throw them in the API notes and you have to go dig for it because like, oh, this is broken. So there's a cost to maintain it that is real. And part of that you need someone who just like understands. You need an in-house resident expert that understands how all these APIs work together, the ways of working. And the more brands you have, the more revenue you have, and the more logins and data sources you have, the more complicated it gets. So these are a lot of the competing considerations that you have to weigh in terms of whether you're going to do this in-house or outsource it.
So the first half, left side, left half is kind of the traditional methodologies that existed for the last few years. The right half side, where it starts to have this AI interface, is kind of the newer technology. So you're seeing here MCP. MCP is the API language and codification that LLM models use. So iDerive has built an MCP, which means that now we can connect Claude directly to iDerive. And what you saw today in the demo was essentially me prompting Claude and asking to build dashboards and run analysis on these different things. Um, the next component, which I put as optional, but frankly is probably the highest value aspect, in my opinion, and what organizations are going to be building a real IP around, which is what are the workflows that I create with this data? Every morning, I want you to go through my listings, identify the suspensions, then do X and Y, notify me. After that, so it's you training your employees, your digital employees, your agents to unlock time for yourself to delegate that work. And the better the instructions that that are developed by your subject matter expertise or our subject matter expertise in our case allows you to get to better outcomes. And Claude is just not very good at that because it just makes up generic stuff, right? It is not a marketplace management expert. It just knows contextual information about e-commerce. And it's missing a lot of components and skip steps. So for us, this is where we're really focusing a lot of time this year, is building these automated workflows that allow us to be more efficient and drive better outcomes. The faster you get speed to insight, and you're able to adapt the strategy, the better outcomes. What does this mean for you as a business? My sense is over the next few months and years, the marketplace is going to keep getting more competitive, right? The ball keeps getting raised. With better tools, it increases competition. So I can fully expect this is why this is so important, and having a first mover advantage and building a competency, building solutions around that. Because as you fast forward 3 years and this becomes normalized or kind of the typical tools that people leverage in their toolbox, if you don't have that and you're behind, it's going to cause some real headaches. And so, right now, I guess in many ways, that speaks to the gap is the problem. That if you don't have a solution and you have a partner that works towards a solution, if an agency doesn't have these kind of tools and develop those, it's creating a big gap. That was the motivation for why we built iDerive. I'll be honest, I worked on the brand side most of my career, and I've had my share of frustration with agencies. And the reason was they often didn't have the right analytical tools and frameworks in order to scale their business, which means that the bigger they got, the worse they were. And what they really needed, those that did really well, were those that had a good handle on reporting and insights in order to build the right conclusions and build my right strategy as a brand. And so
Yeah.
that's what we invest. Evan?
I was just going to add to that what you saw today is the ability to get to insights that actually are meaningful in growing the business or any business. Like what products are declining that are your top products and why, right? Is it an inventory issue? But there's even more with market share, um, and different data that Amazon gives you to like search query performance data that you can tie together with your advertising spend and your inventory to really understand how you can be more strategic in operating your business. Again, there's a lot of different data you can analyze at once, and that's where AI helps close this gap. But it's the difference between, um, you know, being tactical and strategic, in my opinion. And again, moving faster. So there's a lot of opportunity here. We're still in the nascent stages. So I think part of it is training yourself, your team on using better workflows to leverage these capabilities, so that as they continue to evolve, you can, continue to evolve your capabilities and stay ahead of your competition. Any questions for us about AI, how to use it better in managing your business? No? Okay, going once, going twice. Well, we thank you for attending today. Hope that you found this to be productive. And don't hesitate to reach out to us directly if you have any more questions or need help with anything. But we appreciate you attending today and joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.